Okay, I made a major error last week. My wife came to the class, Carrie. Wasn't my best experience. Carrie knows Abby really well, and she's a pretty school marm kind of disciplinarian on me. So she said, it's just wrong for you to be calling all these people's names out. It's like you make them feel awkward, and what if you call somebody the wrong name because you don't have much of a memory? So I said, well, you know what, Abby, tonight I will just apologize to everybody. So she's not feeling well, so she's at home, so she can't hear what I say, okay? But I do want to apologize and say, if that makes people feel awkward, Corey, I'm sorry, Scott, Vanessa, Caitlin, Nathan, Tim, I don't even know. I don't even know. I got to say I'm sorry. So I promised her I wouldn't say anybody else's name, and I've already fallen into the trap. So, but I love you guys. These are people, you got to know, all these people I've called out, I've known them for a long time now, and they're very important to me. So there is this thing as when you're facilitating something that you're desperately grasping for something to make you more comfortable, not make everybody else more comfortable, but to make you a little bit comfortable. So I'm going to look to the corner and say Corey Fowler's name because Corey makes me comfortable, okay? I'm going to look the other way and say Carrie Egler's name because Carrie makes me comfortable. So just know that's where I'm coming from. I love you guys. Let's talk about leadership versus arrogance. The other thing my wife told me was, man, you're too hard. You say things too hard. Okay, there's no way to soften this one up. Arrogance and leadership don't go hand in hand. People won't follow someone who's arrogant and portrays themselves as always above. So let me tell you this. This is 52 years of living life that you guys are hearing. And there's people in here that are older than that, and there's people in here that are younger than that. But there's not 52 years of perfection standing up here saying, I hit the mark every time. Trust me, when I was 18 years old and you kind of have these experiences in your life where you get thrust into being the boss, and you figure out pretty fast you're not much of a leader, you're just a boss, you start trying to learn some of these things. You start trying to dig some things out. If you feel like that's the call that God has on your life, is to really be a leader, which I believe that's a call that's on every person in this room's life, or you wouldn't show up here on Sunday nights when you could be at home watching Wild Kingdom. That's kind of old, isn't it? I just really dated myself. Okay, but just know that there's leadership opportunities and doggone it, responsibility in your life that you lead your family, or you lead a classroom if you're a teacher, or you lead a business team if you're in business, or you lead a section, a group of volunteers at the church. But there's leadership opportunities and responsibilities on your lives. So, that being said, you can't be arrogant about that, okay? Because God doesn't set us up to be first. Jesus said, I came here to serve. I didn't come here to be served. I came here to serve. So ultimately, that's what leadership has to be about. And it's not always about being perfectly right every time, because you will trip over it. You will step in the mud sometimes and know you didn't make a mistake. But if my leadership is good enough, I can go back to you after the fact and say, you know what, I didn't call that shot right. I should have said this, or I should have done that. And people are accepting of that from their leaders because somehow they're human now. They made a mistake, they admit the mistake, and they fix it. So fellas, that works with your wife, and it works with the people that work with you or work for you. That works when we say, I'm sorry. So we got to be willing to do that. And really arrogant people can't ever really say they're sorry, right? Like, you know that person. Everybody knows that person who says, yeah, I was wrong, but, okay, and last week, remember, we said that everything after but negates everything before it. So when I say, hey, I'm sorry, but it wasn't my fault because I was just doing what I was told, but it's not your fault, but it's obviously it's not our fault, okay? People, that's disingenuous to people, and they put that off. So you just have to own your mistakes, and you have to not be arrogant about it and think that you're always right. Arrogance and leadership both tend to work in success and involve power. However, one is proper and one's improper, okay? So we're never leaders because we want to be powerful people. We become powerful people because we're leaders, okay? Arrogant people want power. But powerful people are good leaders, that it builds on that leadership. Leadership is humility-based and not arrogance-based. I don't have to be the leader to be comfortable in a situation. That's what I'm talking about, okay? So when we get in those situations, I do believe this, and people will argue with me about this afterwards, and I'm great with that, because you definitely don't have to agree with everything I say. But there's a place where if I am so arrogant that you can't listen to me, when I walk in a room, you tighten up in a negative way. You start to build up a wall of defense because I'm frustrating you with my arrogance. But I think when real leaders walk in a room, people become comfortable. They're not scared. They're not afraid that they didn't do a good enough job or they're going to be in trouble for something. They're looking for you to help them resolve their issue, whatever that is, whether it's work, personal, whatever. So when you have that feeling that when I walked in that room, it started to simmer down a little bit and everything started to get back on track, that's when you know you're really walking in the place that God wants leaders to be, okay? So the sheep quit running when the shepherd blows the whistle, right? Like at some point, they're going to stop, slow down, and get themselves back together. So that's what we want. We want to be that calming effect. Seeds of wickedness are in anger and pride. I'm always right, you're always wrong, okay? Arrogance and pride makes me say, I'm always right because I'm the boss. I'm always right because I'm the leader. And you're always wrong because you're not. That doesn't work. You need me more than I need you. Let me tell you something. And this happens all the time in all different walks of life. People somehow in their minds become convinced that they're such a high-level player and they're so important that we need them more than they need us. If you make a living as a leader, let me tell you something. You don't need anything more than you need that job that writes you a paycheck. Okay? So don't kid yourself. If you're positioned in a company, in an organization, whatever it is, as a leader, you need that company more than they need you. So you better get your humility tuned up to know, man, I don't only serve this company so that they write me a check, but I also serve these people so that they support me, because one of these days, my back's going to be turned, I'm going to trip, something's going to happen, and I'm going to need them to help me. And if I've positioned myself as this arrogant, self-important leader who always knows everything, people will just step back and go, wow, you fell down. I bet that hurt. And they'll let it come, man. They'll let it roll. So we want to position ourselves to not be that prima donna that says, it is my God-given right to be the boss, and it's your God-given right to serve me. Okay? That doesn't work for people. I'm telling you, people see right through it. So we just want to make sure we're those leaders that people are drawn to and not repelled by, that people want to be in the room with you when you're working on a problem because they want to be part of the resolution. They don't want to not be in the room so that they can watch you realize that you're not as good as you think you are. Psalm 10:2, the wicked in his pride persecutes the poor. Let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. Arrogance lacks compassion. Leadership is fueled by compassion. Just think about the things that Jesus thought when you look in Mark 6:34, and Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved by compassion for them because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. See, Tyler and I walk into a situation and we can't look at it as, man, they're sheep and they don't have a shepherd and this is our opportunity to take over, right? It doesn't work like that, okay? the way it works is Jesus had great compassion on them and said, dang, I wish they'd figured it out. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to teach them how to figure it out. See, it's a whole reversal of what so many people who are in leadership positions, in management positions, take on is the weaker you are, the stronger I am, and that gives me the upper hand. That's not the way it goes. Godly leadership does not work like that. So categorizing people can be very arrogant. So you walk into a situation, you're the new person that the boss hired, and you're going to do all the great things because the boss has been telling you. And here's what people don't understand when you're hiring people. You know, you're selling your company or yourself or the position as much as you're interviewing them to see if they're the right person for the job. So I'm going to sit somebody down and tell them, you know, you're good. You're our number one selection. You're the best I've ever met, because it's all part of the hook of trying to get them into the company, get them into the organization. People are duping people all the time, okay? I mean, it is the way that it goes. So categorizing people and thinking that you need to hear that from me, you don't need to hear that from me. When I hire you, you don't need to hear from me that I think you're the greatest. What you need to hear from me is there are great opportunities that when we team up, we can accomplish some awesome things here, because I think you're the right person for the job. That's about as good a compliment as you can give somebody, right? Like if I'm responsible for this mess and we got to clean it up, I want the best person that I can connect with to do that, and I think you're the best person for that. And it's not all the other stuff. So categorizing people by saying, okay, you need me more than I need you. Okay, you're sheep. Okay, you're not capable. Okay, you're not smart enough. You don't think fast enough. Categorizing people like that is very arrogant. Jesus stretched people because he didn't say, I looked on them with great compassion and I snapped my fingers and fixed everything for them, because we know he could have. He says he looked on them with great compassion and said, I'm going to teach them. I'm going to help them. I'm going to serve with them. Leaders bring people answers and solutions. We don't always have to tell everybody everything that they need to know. Sometimes we need to facilitate their opportunity to learn. So if we handle second mile like that, as good an instructor as Tom Moneypenny is, Tom is a better facilitator, because what he did was he opened the New Testament up for you. For 8 weeks, he just opened the New Testament up and said, hey, learn. Start seeing what this is all about. Let me give you a few tidbits, and you grab onto it and go with it from there. That's where we're best positioned as leaders, as we facilitate other people learning what they need to do. Now, there is a time where there has to be a decision, okay? We're fully capable as leaders of making a decision. But we don't always have to make the decision. Sometimes we have to help people arrive at the solution to their problem. So when we look at it that way, it's not arrogant. It's not, I know you don't, big me, little you. That is not going to prosper people. It's not going to help them get better. And it's never going to set somebody up to replace you so that you can get promoted to the next job. Because really, when you got a teammate, when you got somebody that works with you, you really always want to be positioning them to be in the best spot that they can be in, even if that's your spot. Because trust me, bosses look at things and say, I can't promote him because I don't have anybody to do that job. Now, I may throw him a couple extra bills every month to keep doing that job, but I can't promote him because I don't have somebody to fill his spot or her spot, okay? So we always want to be that person who's positioning someone else that they can come in and take up the slack for us, and we can keep moving forward. Psalm 10:3, for the wicked boasts of his heart's desire. He blesses the greedy and renounces the Lord. So God blesses the greedy, for the wicked boasts of his heart's desire. The wicked blesses the greedy and renounces the Lord. All this is saying is arrogance boasts in its heart. Leaders believe in their hearts. Leaders thinking must be God dependent. We can't suppose that we know more than God does in any situation. Because, here's a for instance. If I'm a bank teller, I know every night I've got to balance out my till, or they're going to take some money out of my check to make it right. Okay? So it's really important that I keep track of every penny through the day. If I were a bank teller, really, I'd be broke in a New York second, because I'm not that guy that keeps every penny accounted for. Okay? So every day my employer's taking 45 cents out of my check to get my till right because I didn't keep up with it during the day. I'm not going to be a great bank teller. I have to depend on God to look over my shoulder and go, Tony, I've got this assignment for you. You said you were a consultant and this bank wants to hire you, but you're going to have to keep the till every night. I am on my knees constantly saying, God, please. Shiloh and I are saying, God, please get that 45 cents from me every day, or otherwise at the end of the week I'm going to owe 2 1/4. And see, Carrie, I can do math. 45 times 5 is 2 1/4. Okay, all right. So leaders' thinking must be God-dependent. We're counting on God to give us the right thought, to grant us wisdom. His word says, we ask, he grants liberally. Confident is not arrogant. We can be confident as leaders because as dry as my mouth is, I'm not very confident at doing this. Here's a funny thing about me, that if I were on one of those game shows where they said, what's something about you that people would never suspect? I had to take these speech therapy classes when I was a little kid because I stuttered. I had an uncle and myself who were really bad about it, and I can't even fake it because I'm afraid my brain will flip back to that and I'll start doing it again. So I can't even imitate myself, but when I was 6 or 7 years old, there was this really nice lady that came to my school, and she sat down in my class, and she would talk to me and make me read sentences and say things, and I could never figure it out. And so one day I went home and I said, Mom, this lady comes, and she goes, yeah, I know her. I asked her to come and talk to you. And I said, why did she come and talk to me? And my mom looked at me and says, because you don't talk right. Okay, Mom, I got you. So I started to figure out at some point about that time I stuttered. And who would guess now? I only stutter 8 or 12 times each night I'm up here. So I think I'm doing okay. But we can't be prideful about that. We can't be too prideful about it, but I can be confident that what, God delivered me. Somebody took the time to teach me, and my parents made the investment to make that happen when they had nothing. They had nothing, and they figured out how to do that so that someday I could stand up here in front of you guys, and I could be an idiot for a million other reasons, but you're not going to ding me for being a stutterer, which is even a hard word to say, actually. Okay, so Jesus thought, when you think about the way Jesus really thought about these things, Mark 9:35, and he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, if anyone desires to be first, he'll be last and servant of all. So we talked for a minute last week about the other scripture, and I forgot to look it up because I can't remember where it is, but it talks about don't sit at the front, because if they don't want you at the front, they're going to come get you and you're going to be embarrassed. So sit at the back and let them bring you forward, because then it's an honor, right? Like, it's common sense, and we all want to be honored somehow. So that's the way Jesus thought, though. If you want to be first, you got to be last, and you got to be a servant of all. So that's what Jesus is looking for in leaders. But we can be confident in that. We can stand up and we can speak our mind, and we can help people make decisions, and we can help people find solutions and be confident without being arrogant. Arrogance is inspired by greed. Leadership is inspired by need. See these little catchy phrases I just stick in there. Inspired by need or inspired by greed. So we know really quickly where we fall on that. Prosperity, success, materialism, and selfishness get lumped together incorrectly. Understand what I'm saying? Prosperity, success, materialism, and selfishness get lumped together incorrectly. That has been the fight in the church, in the non-denominational, charismatic, evangelical church, that half of that crowd says preaching prosperity is materialistic and greedy. And half of the crowd says it's okay to prosper. but you can't be materialistic and greedy when you do it. That's the camp that I fall in. That's the camp that Pastor Bill falls in, I promise you. So you could know that all your elders fall in that camp. Prosperity is okay. Materialism and greed are not okay. But those things in the world's view get all lumped together. So we want to help people understand that. God wants us to prosper and be successful. And leaders are successful. If you're truly a leader, you will be successful. If you're truly leading people, God will bring prosperity to you. Because He doesn't want you to be a pauper leading other paupers or a poor person leading other poor people. He wants you to be someone that people can strive to attain what you attain. Like we're in the race, as Paul said, and we're trying to win the medal. All right? So we're just trying to win a medal. We're running the race trying to win a medal. We don't have to feel bad about that, and you don't have to buy into the world saying, hey, if you get a raise because you did a good job in leadership, that's a negative. That's not correct. All right? Joshua 1:8, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you'll make your way prosperous, and then you'll have good success. Leaders inherently understand the difference between arrogance and leadership is motivation. So when you're set up in a leadership position, what is your motivation to show up for work every day or to show up early on Sunday mornings? What's your motivation? Is it because are you motivated because you want to come up here and be behind this pulpit at any level? Or is your motivation to go, you know what? There's going to be at least 100 people that show up today that don't know God from a good grade of apple butter, and I stole that from Bill Shear, by the way, that don't know God from a good grade of apple butter. There's going to be 100 of those, and man, we want to see them at this altar with their hands raised, begging God to spare their life. Okay? That's what we want. So what's your motivation? Is your motivation to get to be here, or is your motivation to get to see people there? So that's where the leaders wind up, is their whole motivation about doing all this. Whatever job they have, you know, I've noticed that it's very competitive to be on staff at our church. That for every job we have, there's 5 or 6 or 8 people standing in line, and they're honestly feeling a little uncomfortable because they didn't get selected, okay? And then I see sometimes inside where we're changing people's job duties around, we're doing some different things that people it's all about their motivation. So there are certain people that I could walk to on the staff and say, you know, all I want you to do is just sweep the parking lot every day, and they'd go, hey, that's great. Okay? There are people that I could go to at a bank and say, all I want you to do is sweep the parking lot every day, and they would say, I will never do that. I swept parking lots when I was 16. I'm never doing that again. So we're always, as leaders, when we're promoting people, when we're moving people around, we're compassionate towards them because I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to see their feelings hurt. But at the same time, you're always looking for who's going to just belly up to the bar and do what they have to do. Because that's what church work is all about, and that's why we're all here ultimately, is because we have leadership responsibilities in this house. So what are those leadership responsibilities about? That's the question for you. Psalm 10:4, the wicked in his proud countenance does not seek God. God is in none of his thoughts. Arrogance pushes our way of thinking. Leadership points to God's way of thinking. First is last and serving. Okay, that's God's way of thinking. The world's way of thinking is, if I'm last, I'm not ever going to get to be first, so I got to start somewhere higher up the totem pole. And if I got to cut a couple of people's heel tendons to get there so they can't climb as fast, that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to get up above. That's the world's way of thinking. Both arrogance and leadership want to do something about people's thinking. Think about that. Arrogant people want you to think the way they think because they're convinced they're right. Leadership people, godly people, want you to think the way that they think because they are striving at every level to think godly thoughts. God has to be in all of our thoughts. Don't make big decisions based on your ability. So if you're thinking about a new job tonight, You don't walk out of here because I got you all revved up or I said something that really ticked you off and convinced you that what you heard from God was exactly the right thing and what you heard from Tony was the wrong thing, because that happens sometimes, okay? You don't do that based on emotion and based on your own thought. You go out to make a big decision, you make sure that God's in the middle of that decision. And I can tell you, as a young married guy, God was never in my decisions. And it was one bump in the road after another. And once I figured it out, once I sat under teaching from people like Bill Shear and Scott Houston and men that have mattered so much in my life, it started to make a little bit more sense. Like, wait a minute, I don't have to understand everything, and I don't even have to sit and go, okay, God, you have to make this decision for me. At some point, you know you're living a godly life. You know you're in the will of God. So when it comes up, you know you have God's protection on you. You know you have God's leading in your life. And you're not always figuring out every decision. At some point, decisions become easier because you're living a Spirit-filled life. Okay? So you don't have to get hung up on every day-to-day decision if you're living that Spirit-led life. You can have confidence that if you've given your mind, will, and emotions over to God, He'll direct your steps. It's easier to stay in the will of God once you're there than it is to get out of it. Because I have to make a conscious decision to not do what God wants me to do. Once I've really given my mind, will, and emotions over to the Lord, I have to decide not to. Okay? That's harder for me than just staying in the will of God and doing whatever comes up in front of me. All right? Psalm 10:5. His ways are always prospering. Your judgments are far above and out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he sneers at them. Arrogance is ill-advised confidence. Leadership has godly confidence. Arrogance makes you feel like you are above difficulty, which is never the truth. Because the Word of God, the red part, says this life is full of trials. There will be trials, but don't be afraid because I've overcome the world. Okay? The only way we get in on that is to give it to God. But Jesus said, there's going to be difficulties, but don't be afraid because I've overcome the world. It's dangerous to think that it's the way A says, arrogance makes you feel like you're above difficulty. Guess what else? If you feel like you're always above difficulty, when a difficulty comes, a lot of us flip out and we get scared and we start living in fear and we start thinking, man, this isn't going to work out. This isn't going to turn the way it's supposed to turn. I'm in trouble now. And you're laying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're not sleeping well and you're not resting and you're not eating properly because you're freaked out by whatever difficulty there is because you just didn't keep that godly confidence of knowing, wait a minute, this can't fail. I live a godly life. I stay in my lane. I do what I'm supposed to do. I know that I've given my mind, will, and emotions over to God. I don't have to be afraid. Even when that speed bump happens, there's smooth sailing on the other side of it. Arrogance achieves by manipulation. Leadership achieves by inspiration. I used to teach people that supervision and management was psychological warfare. I've told people that, and I repent from saying that. Because it's easy to say, I just have to be faster on the trigger and outsmart all those people that work for me, and then they'll do what I want. And that's a worldly way of leading. A godly way of leading is that we can't outsmart everybody else. There's a dozen people in here that are way more qualified to teach this than I am. I can't think that I have it cornered. Okay? Arrogance is always speaking about one thing and means something else. Again, it's that bait and switch. Okay? That's what arrogance does. Saul makes promises to David and doesn't keep them. Okay? Saul's there when David is anointed as the next king, and the next thing you know, he's chucking spears at him. Okay? So that's what arrogance does in leadership positions. In leadership, there's times when you have to say things you don't want to say. However, during those times, there is without fail a way to say things to people that evokes positive change and brings life and healing. I have had to give more bad news to more good people in my life than I ever want to claim publicly. People that I've loved, people that I have respected. I have fired my own boss before, okay? It is the worst possible situation at that moment that you can feel in. And what your responsibility when you're giving bad news to people is to find a way, doggone it. You got to find a way. Like, I have to bring healing and hope and faith in that conversation, or I'm not leading people, I'm just distributing people. And that's not how it works. So if we're godly leaders, if we're really doing what God would have us to do, then we are going to find that way. And it's going to be prayer, and it's going to be fasting, and it's as hard as anything else you'll do, is for me to find a way to say to somebody I love, I've got to make a change here. I have to do something different. Because I want that person to come out on top. Ultimately, I don't care about whatever their job is. I don't care about any of that. I want them to come out on top. It's the hardest thing you have to do as a leader, is to give bad news to good people, and just make sure that you trust God with the words. He says He'll put words in our mouth. And I trust that. I trust God to do that. Every time I don't, it's typically a disaster. I wind up in court. Okay? All right. So Psalm 10:11, he said in his heart, God has forgotten, he hides his face, he will never see. Arrogance needs no grace. Leadership thrives on grace. Live in humility. You need to read the book. If you don't take away anything else from you guys didn't even have me a full 8 weeks. It hadn't been that bad, Corey, has it? Because I was gone for a week, and you guys were gone for a week, and then I'm running overtime tonight to get in another week. And I'm just telling you that if you don't take anything else away from anything I've said, you need to read the book Humility by Andrew Murray. Go online, Google it up, order it, and read it. It's hard to read. It's tricky because it looks like it's about 50 pages long. But I'm just telling you that when you figure out that humility is not that false aw shucks deal, it's never about me, it's always about God. In my business dealings, in my personal life, in facilitating this class, it's never about me, it's always about God. That's what that book's about. And if you really want to be a leader, if you really want to sharpen your game, up it to the next notch, you need to read that book. Remember that God knows all and sees all. You're not slipping one past Him. Okay? So your motivation, God knows what your motivation is. Remember that it's the same for me as it is for everyone else. Obviously, there's nothing special about me. If I can do this, any one of you can do this. And that's not just loose talk. I'm telling you, you just have to submit yourself to the same things that I have and that other facilitators in this course work have, which is I'm going to beat my flesh and read the Bible a lot. That's about how tricky it is. And start to gain an understanding of that. So I've gone 4 minutes and 11 seconds over, and I'm very sorry. And I love you guys, and I'm so proud of you. This is a night to celebrate. So bring it on, Corey.